On a snow-covered mountaintop on Christmas Eve, the wind cut like knives through the darkness. Female SEAL sniper Ava Frostbite Hale lay alone, abandoned by her unit in the middle of enemy territory. The radio crackled with nothing but desperate static. No reinforcements, no extraction, no way out. But when she heard the choked cries for help from the team that had left her behind, Ava didn't hesitate. She rose from the frozen snow, loaded her rifle, and began her counterattack alone. 33 enemies fell that night, and the entire platoon survived only because of the woman they had abandoned. The Afghan mountains stretched endlessly beneath a slate-gray sky, each peak sharper than the last, like the teeth of some ancient beast. Christmas Eve, and the only decoration was fresh snow falling in thick curtains, reducing visibility to less than 200 meters. Perfect conditions for an ambush, terrible conditions for surveillance. Ava Frostbite Hale had been lying in the same position for 4 hours, her body a statue of discipline and endurance. The cold had long since penetrated every layer of her gear, settling into her bones like an old injury. But she didn't move. Couldn't move. Not when the mission depended on absolute stillness. Through her rifle scope, she tracked 3 Taliban scouts moving along the northeastern ridge. They were cautious, experienced fighters who understood these mountains better than any American ever could. They checked the ground for tracks, scanned the heights for observers, moved in a tactical pattern that spoke of professional training. Frostbite, status report. Lieutenant Marcus Brooks's voice cut through her earpiece, sharp and impatient as always. 3 hostiles, northeast ridge, approximately 800 meters from your position. Ava responded, her voice barely above a whisper. Moving slowly. Conducting route reconnaissance. Weapons? AK variants, 1 possible RPG. Can't confirm at this distance with the snow. Copy that. Maintain overwatch. Do not engage unless they spot us. Understood. Ava watched the scouts disappear into a cluster of rocks. She logged their position mentally, creating a tactical map in her mind of every enemy movement she'd observed over the past 6 hours. This was her role, always the same. Stay back, watch, provide intelligence. Never the tip of the spear, always the eyes in the sky. For the 6 months since she'd been assigned to SEAL Team 7, Lieutenant Brooks had kept her at a careful distance from direct action. The first female SEAL sniper in the platoon, and he treated her like a delicate instrument that might break under real pressure. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd scored higher in sniper school than anyone in the platoon. Her record in Helmand Province included 3 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters, each one saving American lives. But Brooks remained unconvinced, his skepticism showing in small ways, assignments that kept her on the periphery, comments that seemed supportive but carried an edge of doubt. Just remember, Hale, he'd said during the mission briefing 12 hours ago, when things get hot, I need you to keep your cool. Can't have anyone freezing up out there. The other operators had chuckled, but the message underneath wasn't funny. He still questioned whether she belonged. Ava shifted her weight fractionally, easing the pressure on her left hip. Below her position, the rest of the platoon was moving into what they designated Position Charlie, a cluster of rocks and a shallow ravine that offered cover and good sightlines to the valley floor. 12 operators, the best of the best, moving like shadows through the snow. The mission objective was straightforward. Monitor a Taliban supply route through the Kunar Valley where intelligence suggested a high-value convoy would pass sometime tonight. Possible HVT in transport. Possible weapons shipment. Possibly nothing but bad intel and wasted time. But they'd been ordered to observe and report, so here they were on Christmas Eve, freezing their asses off while most of America opened presents and drank eggnog. Through her scope, Ava could see Staff Sergeant Diego Ortega taking point, his movements fluid and confident. Behind him, Petty Officers Chen, Rodriguez, and Patterson spread out in a defensive formation. Good spacing. Professional execution. These were men she trusted with her life, even if they didn't fully trust her yet. The snow fell harder. Visibility dropped to 100 meters. Ava's scope began to accumulate frost on the objective lens. She wiped it carefully with a treated cloth, her movements economical and practiced. Then, everything changed. The small LED screen on her wrist that displayed the UAV's thermal feed went dark. 1 second, clean imagery of the valley floor. The next, dead static. Command, we've lost the eye in the sky. Brooks transmitted, tension immediately tightening his voice. "Repeat, UAV is down." Ava felt it before she understood it, a prickle of wrongness crawling up her spine. She scanned left, then right, adjusting her scope's magnification. Movement. Too much movement. Shapes materializing from the snow like ghosts. "Brooks, you've got multiple contacts closing from the east," she transmitted urgently. "I count at least." The first mortar round hit 30 meters below her position. The explosion was massive. A pillar of fire and ice that shook the entire mountainside. Ava's world became noise and chaos. Rocks and frozen earth rained down. Her ears rang like church bells. But training overrode shock. She was already rolling left, scrambling toward a depression in the terrain she'd marked as emergency cover. "Frostbite. Report." Brooks's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. "Taking indirect fire. They've got my position." She slid into the depression just as another round impacted exactly where she'd been lying 3 seconds earlier. The Taliban weren't probing anymore. This was a coordinated attack, and they knew exactly where she was. "How?" she breathed. The concealment had been perfect. No movement, no heat signature visible through the snow, no. The UAV. They'd hacked it, used its last known position to triangulate her exact location. Sophisticated, professional. This wasn't some ragtag militia. This was planned. More rounds fell in rapid succession, walking up the mountainside toward her new position. Each explosion sent shrapnel screaming through the air, cutting through snow and stone like invisible blades. Ava pressed herself flat, making her body as small as possible. Her radio sparked, damaged by a piece of shrapnel that had torn through her pack. Through the static and interference, she caught fragments of Brooks's voice. Under heavy fire, pulling back, cannot maintain. "Brooks, I need extraction!" Ava keyed her radio, pressing the transmit button hard as if that would somehow force the signal through. "Brooks!" Position compromised. Too hot. Extracting too. "Brooks, I'm still on the mountain." Static. Just static and the distant sound of rotor blades. The extraction helicopter. But the sound was wrong. It was moving away from her position, not toward it. They were leaving. Ava's chest constricted. She pressed the radio again, her voice rising despite her training. "Brooks, this is Frostbite. I am still on the mountain. Do not extract without me." Nothing. The rotors faded into the distance, swallowed by wind and snow. She was alone. For 10 seconds, Ava simply lay there, her mind refusing to process the reality. They'd left her. Her team, her platoon, the men she'd trained with and deployed with, they'd evacuated and left her behind in a Taliban kill zone. The artillery had stopped. Worse, much worse. That meant ground forces were coming to confirm casualties and collect intelligence from the bodies. Pain lanced through her left shoulder. She looked down and saw blood soaking through her white camouflage. A piece of shrapnel, maybe 3 inches long, had torn through the outer layer and buried itself in muscle. Not arterial, she'd be dead already if it were, but serious enough to kill her slowly if infection set in. Move. She had to move. Ava dragged herself toward an overhang she'd noted during her initial reconnaissance, a small cave formation created by centuries of wind erosion about 50 meters upslope. Every movement sent fire through her shoulder. Blood left a trail in the snow, bright red against white. She tried to cover it, kicking snow over the worst of it. But her strength was fading. Voices below, Pashto, getting closer. She reached the cave entrance and collapsed inside, gasping. The space was barely large enough for her body, but it offered concealment and some protection from the elements. Her hands shook as she opened her medical kit. The pressure bandage went on first, packed against the wound with gritted teeth and a bitten-off scream. The pain was extraordinary, white-hot and all-consuming, but the bleeding slowed. She swallowed 2 antibiotic pills dry, nearly choking on them. Her radio was damaged, but not completely dead. She could receive, though transmission was intermittent at best. She listened to the static, hoping for something. Anything. Outside, the voices grew louder. They were searching the mountainside systematically. She could hear rocks being overturned, equipment being shifted. They were thorough, professional. Ava checked her weapons with trembling hands. Rifle, functional, though the scope had a small crack in the outer lens. Not ideal, but usable. 4 magazines remaining 80 rounds. Sidearm, intact. 3 magazines. 2 fragmentation grenades. A combat knife. A few pieces of survival equipment that wouldn't help her fight but might keep her alive if she could escape. Not much, but she'd been trained to do more with less. The searchers passed within 20 meters of her cave. She watched through a gap in the rocks as 5 Taliban fighters moved across the slope, weapons ready, eyes scanning. One of them stopped, looking directly at the overhang where she hid. Ava's hand went to her knife. If he came closer, she'd have to kill him silently, but that would bring the others, and she was in no condition for close combat. The fighter turned away, called something to his companions. They moved on. She waited until they were gone, then allowed herself to breathe normally. Her shoulder throbbed, her body shook with cold and shock, but she was alive. Night fell completely. The temperature dropped to what felt like -20. Ava activated a chemical heat pack and pressed it against her core, trying to stave off hypothermia. She couldn't risk a fire or even her electric heater. The thermal signature would draw enemy fire. In the darkness, she pulled out her phone. No signal, useless for communication. But it held one thing that mattered: a photo of Lily, 8 years old. Gap-toothed smile, blonde pigtails, wearing a ridiculous Christmas sweater with a reindeer on it. Holding up a drawing she'd made a stick figure in military gear with "My Hero Mom" written in purple crayon. Lily wasn't Ava's biological daughter. She'd been Sarah's girl. Sarah, Ava's best friend since BUD's training, the first other woman who'd made it through with her. Sarah, who died in a training accident 2 years ago when her parachute failed to deploy. Sarah, who'd made Ava promise with her dying breath to take care of her daughter. "I'll come home," Ava whispered to the photo. "I promise, baby, I'll come home." She tucked the phone back into her vest, next to her heart, and tried to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. Only cold, only pain, only the growing certainty that she'd been abandoned to die on this mountain. And beneath that, something harder, something colder than the Afghan winter. The question of what she'd do if she survived. Dawn came slowly. The sun, a pale disk behind clouds, the color of old steel. Ava had spent the night drifting between consciousness and something that wasn't quite sleep, her body fighting hypothermia and blood loss with stubbornness that bordered on supernatural. She'd survived worse. Or at least, that's what she told herself. The shoulder wound had clotted overnight, sealed with congealed blood, and the pressure bandage. It would need proper medical attention soon, or infection would set in. But for now, it had stopped bleeding. Small victories. Moving with infinite care, Ava crawled to the cave entrance and began scanning the valley below through her rifle scope. What she saw made her forget the cold, the pain, everything. Taliban fighters, at least 40, maybe 50, were establishing positions throughout the valley floor. Not random positions, coordinated, overlapping fields of fire. Mortar teams setting up behind natural cover. Machine gun nests oriented toward the northwest, toward the route the platoon would have taken during their extraction. Ava's blood ran cold for reasons that had nothing to do with temperature. This wasn't a random deployment. This was an ambush. The Taliban knew where Brooks and the others were heading and had set up a perfect kill box. Her radio crackled suddenly. Weak, broken signal, but there. NY station. This is 7 actual need. Immediate. Brooks's voice, barely audible through static. Our rounded heavy casualties. Anyone read? The transmission cut out. But Ava had heard enough. The platoon was trapped somewhere to the northwest, probably 3 or 4 kilometers away. The Taliban had boxed them in, and now they were tightening the noose. Ava stared through her scope at the enemy below. Then at her ammunition. 4 magazines. 80 rounds against 50+ fighters. The math was clear. Impossible. She could leave, navigate east, make for the Pakistani border, find a way to friendly forces. The men who'd abandoned her would face their fate without her. Fair, maybe even just. But that wasn't the calculation running through her mind. She thought of Ortega, who'd taught her the finer points of desert navigation, of Chen, who'd shared his family's homemade dumplings during their last stateside training, of Rodriguez, who'd shown her photos of his newborn daughter and joked that she'd probably grow up to be a SEAL too. Good men, flawed men, men who'd made a terrible decision under fire, but men worth saving nonetheless. And she thought of Lily. What lesson was she teaching her daughter if she abandoned her brothers in arms out of spite? What kind of mother? What kind of soldier? Ava reached into her vest and touched the phone, felt the outline of Lily's photo through the fabric. If I walk away, she whispered to the empty cave, to the mountain, to God or fate or whatever was listening, what kind of person am I? The answer came immediately, carved in ice and certainty. Not the person Sarah had believed in, not the person Lily needed her to be. Ava checked her rifle, chambered around, and began to plan. She had elevation, concealment, and surprise. She had skill honed through thousands of hours of training. She had fury. Most importantly, she had a choice, and she chose to fight. Tactical planning came naturally after years of training. Ava spent 20 minutes observing enemy movements, mapping positions in her mind with the precision of a master chess player. She identified key targets, the command element, heavy weapons teams, rally points. The enemy commander was easy to spot, better gear, radio equipment, giving orders to subordinates. He'd positioned himself near a cluster of large boulders that provided excellent cover. Smart. That would be her first target. Take out the head, the body flails. Chaos was her best weapon when facing these odds. Her advantages, elevation, concealment, superior training, and the element of surprise. The Taliban thought she was dead or gone. They weren't watching the heights behind them. Her disadvantages: outnumbered 40 to 1, injured, limited ammunition, no support, no backup plan. In Bud.S, they'd taught her that successful operations came down to proper planning and execution. But they'd also taught her something else, something the instructors never said out loud, but demonstrated through every exercise. When the plan goes to hell, improvise. She was about to improvise on a scale that would either become legend or get her killed. Probably both. The radio crackled again, clearer this time. Brooks's voice, strained and desperate. "This is SEAL Team 7 actual to any station. We are pinned down, heavy fire from multiple directions. Casualties mounting. If anyone receives this transmission..." His voice broke. Not from fear, but from the acceptance of death. "Tell our families we fought well." Ava keyed her damaged radio. "Brooks, this is Frostbite." Silence. Shocked, complete silence. "Hail?" Brooks finally said, his voice barely recognizing the possibility. "But the artillery we thought you were... dead?" "Yeah, I got that impression when you left me." The words came out flat, emotionless. Facts, not accusations. "Listen carefully. I'm going to save your asses. Stay low, don't move until I give the word. Understood?" "Ava, there's at least 40 hostiles between us and Rostyle. Do you understand, Lieutenant?" Another pause. Then, quietly, a word that felt like it cost him everything. "Yes." "Good, stand by." Ava settled into a proper shooting position, using her pack to create a stable platform. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The pain in her shoulder faded to background noise. Everything narrowed to the scope. The target. The wind. Range to primary target. 450 meters. Wind. Gusting northwest at 15 knots. Snow falling, but lighter now. Temperature. -18 Celsius. She made the calculations automatically, adjusting for elevation, wind drift, the Coriolis effect at this range, even the slight crack in her scope lens that would pull shots marginally left. Her finger rested on the trigger. Steady, sure. "Merry Christmas, you bastards," she whispered, and fired. The Taliban commander's head snapped back violently. He dropped like a marionette with cut strings, radio falling from his dead hand. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. The fighters around him simply stared, unable to process what had just happened. Ava had already shifted to her second target. A man near the boulder cluster was reaching for the fallen radio, trying to establish communications with whoever was on the other end. She put a 7.62 millimeters round through his chest cavity. He collapsed across the commander's body. 2 down, 31 to go. The valley erupted in confusion. Fighters scrambled for cover, shouting in Pashto, scanning wildly for the shooter. But the snow-muffled sound, the mountain created acoustic confusion, and Ava's muzzle flash was hidden by the cave's overhang. They had no idea where death was coming from. She used their panic ruthlessly. A fighter shouting orders became her third target. A man with an RPG loader climbing onto a rock for a better vantage became her fourth. Another fighter with radio equipment fifth. She was systematically destroying their ability to coordinate, communicate, or bring heavy weapons to bear. 6. 7. A machine gunner trying to set up his weapon. His loader, still feeding the belt, both dropped within seconds of each other. The Taliban were firing back now, but at ghosts. Bullets sprayed across the mountainside, hundreds of meters from her actual position. They were shooting at echoes, at imagination, at nothing. 8. A fighter had spotted the general direction, was pointing up the mountain and rallying others. Ava's round caught him in the hand, first a calculated warning shot that made him stumble. Her second round ended him as he staggered backward. 9. Another coordinator, trying to organize a squad. He fell mid-sentence. Brooks, Ava transmitted, her voice eerily calm. I've disrupted their command structure. You have a window. Move to the southern ravine on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Moving! Brooks's response was immediate. Through her scope, Ava watched the platoon break from their position, 12 figures sprinting through the snow in tactical bounds. The Taliban spotted them immediately and began redirecting fire. Ava wouldn't allow it. She acquired 3 fighters setting up a PKM machine gun that would have shredded the platoon. First round, the gunner's head. Second round, the loader's chest. The third man, the one feeding ammunition, started to run. Mistake. Ava led him by half a body length, accounting for his speed and the crosswind, and fired. He went down hard, sliding several meters through the snow before stopping in a red-stained heap. 12 dead, 21 to go. Her first magazine was empty. She reloaded smoothly, muscle memory taking over. 3 magazines left, 60 rounds. She needed to make every single shot count. Her radio squawked. Ortega's voice, breathless from running and combat. Frostbite, what the hell? Who else is up there with you? Despite everything, Ava almost smiled. Just me, Sergeant. Bullshit. I count at least 6 different shooting positions. Nope, just one very angry sniper. Keep moving, you're not clear yet. She scanned for new targets. The Taliban were adapting, taking cover more effectively, moving in smaller groups. They'd figured out they were facing a sniper, even if they hadn't located her exact position. But Ava wasn't finished, not by half. She settled back into her scope, found her next target, and continued the systematic destruction of an entire enemy force, one bullet at a time. The platoon reached the southern ravine, a narrow cut in the terrain that provided temporary cover from direct fire. But temporary was the operative word. Ava could see Taliban reinforcements arriving from the north, another 20 fighters, fresh and eager. The odds were getting worse. Brooks came on the radio, and his voice had changed completely. The dismissive authority was gone. What remained was raw and honest. Ava, I don't know how to say this except directly. I'm sorry. For everything. For doubting you. For leaving you. For every time I questioned whether you belonged. Save the apology tour for the after-action report, Ava said, scanning for threats. Right now, I need you to listen very carefully. I'm listening. In approximately 60 seconds, the enemy is going to mass for a major push on your position. I need you to fall back another 100 meters on my command. Draw them into the open. Ortega cut in, his tactical mind already seeing the problem. That's a kill box, Frostbite. They'll cut us apart in the open. Not if I cut them apart first, Ava said quietly. She paused, then added, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Silence stretched across the radio. She could almost hear them weighing the decision, weighing her. Finally, Brooks spoke. We trust you. What do you need? Those 3 words, we trust, you hit harder than any enemy round. Ava blinked, cleared her vision, forced her emotions back into their locked box. On my mark, fall back in tactical bounds. Standard leapfrog pattern. I'll have overwatch. Understood. Standing by. Ava watched the Taliban organize below. They'd learned from losing 12 men to an invisible shooter. They were moving in coordinated groups now, using cover effectively, advancing in bounds just like any well-trained infantry force. Smart. Disciplined. Dangerous. But predictable. She could see the assault forming like a wave building offshore. They'd surge forward in approximately 45 seconds, overwhelming the ravine through sheer numbers. Ava shifted her position slightly, finding a shooting lane that would give her clear sightlines to the approach route. Her shoulder screamed in protest. She ignored it. 30 seconds, she transmitted. She chambered around, controlled her breathing, became the weapon she'd been trained to be. 15 seconds. The Taliban tensed, officers shouting final commands. Brooks, execute now. The platoon broke cover, retreating in perfect tactical formation. Immediately, the Taliban charged, sensing victory in their grasp. Ava opened fire and turned the valley floor into a graveyard. 13, 14, 15. The leading edge of the Taliban assault crumbled like a wave hitting a seawall. Ava worked her bolt-action rifle with mechanical precision, each shot placed with the care of a surgeon and the efficiency of an executioner. 16. A fighter diving for cover behind a snow-covered boulder. She'd anticipated the movement, fired at where he would be rather than where he was. The bullet caught him mid-dive. He never reached cover. 17. 18. Two fighters attempting to flank left. She pivoted smoothly, acquired both targets in rapid succession. The first shot dropped the leader. The second caught his partner before he could process what had happened. The Taliban were realizing they'd walked into an ambush of one. They began taking cover, trying to locate her position through triangulation of her muzzle reports. Bullets started striking the rocks around the cave entrance, sending chips of stone and ice flying. Ava rolled backward deeper into the cave as fire concentrated on her position. She could hear rounds impacting outside, the sharp crack of bullets striking stone. They'd found her general area. "They've got you marked, Frostbite," Brooks shouted over the radio. "Get out of there." "Not done yet," she said calmly, reloading her third magazine. 2 magazines left after this, 40 rounds. She waited, counting seconds. 10, 15, 20. The incoming fire slackened as magazines ran dry and fighters had to reload. In that brief lull, maybe 3 seconds, she popped back up and fired 3 times in rapid succession. 19, 20, 21. But the Taliban were adapting faster than she'd hoped. She spotted a 6-man squad breaking off from the main force, climbing toward her position using dead ground and covered approaches. They were good, moving with the skill of veterans who understood mountain warfare. Ava slung her rifle across her back and drew her sidearm. Close quarters now. The cave would become a fatal funnel. But there was no other option. The first fighter appeared at the cave entrance, silhouetted against the gray sky. Ava put 2 rounds center mass before he could bring his AKM to bear. He fell backward, tumbling down the slope. 22. Another came fast, already firing. Ava dropped flat, felt bullets crack through the air, inches above her head. She rolled right, came up on one knee, and engaged. 2 shots. The fighter collapsed. 23. Footsteps on stone, multiple contacts, at least 3 more coming fast. Ava grabbed one of her fragmentation grenades, pulled the pin, counted 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and threw it out the cave entrance. The explosion was deafening in the confined space. Her ears rang like bells in a cathedral. Snow and debris filled the air. Through the smoke and chaos, she heard screaming, moaning, the wet sounds of men dying badly. 24, 25, possibly 26 or 27, she couldn't confirm through the debris cloud, but the grenade had been well placed. She waited, sidearm trained on the entrance, breathing hard. Blood trickled from her nose, the overpressure from the grenade in the enclosed space. Her head pounded. Her shoulder was bleeding again, soaking through the bandage. But she was alive. No more footsteps. The assault squad was done. Frostbite, status. Ortega's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. "Still here," Ava gasped, the words tasting like copper. "They're pulling back. For now." But she knew what would come next. She'd killed too many of their fighters, disrupted too many assaults. They wouldn't just leave. They'd send their best. Ava crawled out of the smoke-filled cave, found a new position higher up the mountain where a fallen tree provided natural concealment. Every movement was agony, but she forced herself to keep going. Because somewhere down there, in the chaos and death, a counter-sniper was looking for her. And the real duel was about to begin. Ava relocated to a position 70 meters upslope, where ancient weathering had created a natural depression behind a fallen pine tree. The wood was frozen solid, providing excellent ballistic protection. More importantly, it broke up her silhouette against the snow. She settled in, scanning the battlefield through her scope. The platoon had gained ground during the chaos, but they were still pinned in the valley. Through the scope, she counted approximately 30 Taliban fighters still combat effective. And somewhere among them, a specialist who would be hunting her now. Frostbite, we've got eyes on what looks like a designated marksman, Chen transmitted. Eastern Ridge, approximately 600 meters from our position. I see him, Ava said. She'd already spotted the figure, a rocky outcrop with perfect sight lines covering both her last position and the platoon's current location. The shooter was setting up carefully, using natural terrain features and camouflage with professional skill. This wasn't some Taliban fighter with an old Dragunov. This was a trained sniper, possibly foreign, maybe Chechen or one of the experienced jihadists who'd fought in multiple theaters. For 5 minutes, neither fired. Both were searching through their scopes, waiting for the other to make the smallest mistake. A flash of movement, a glint of glass, any tell that would give away position. The snow had lightened, but the wind remained treacherous, gusting from the northwest in unpredictable patterns. The mountain created eddies and currents that made ballistic calculations a nightmare. Ava studied the wind, watching snow devils spiral up the mountain face, observing how the gusts moved through different terrain features. She built a mental model of the airflow, looking for patterns in the chaos. The enemy sniper fired first. His bullet cracked past Ava's position, missing by less than 6 inches. He'd spotted some micro-movement, the rise and fall of her breathing, perhaps, or a fractional shift in her rifle's position. Ava didn't move, didn't flinch. Panic would get her killed. Instead, she waited, absolutely still, watching. 3 seconds. 4. 5. The wind shifted, and she saw it a spiral updraft caused by temperature differentials in the mountain face, creating a corkscrew pattern in the falling snow. It lasted perhaps 2 seconds before collapsing. Ava waited. Watched. The pattern repeated, 12 seconds between cycles. She began counting. At 10 seconds, she made her final calculations. At 11, she settled her breathing. At 12, the updraft began to form. She fired. The Christmas wind shot, as it would later be called in after-action reports. Her bullet rode the spiral current, curved around the natural barrier that should have protected the enemy sniper, and found its target with mathematical precision. The enemy shooter jerked backward and went still. 27. Jesus Christ, someone breathed over the radio. Did you just curve a bullet around a mountain? Ava didn't respond. She was already engaging new targets. The remaining Taliban were breaking, their command shattered, their best shooter dead, their numbers reduced to a fraction of the original force. But they weren't fleeing. Not yet. 6 fighters remained in effective combat positions, still dangerous. 28. A fighter with a radio, trying to call for reinforcements. Ava's round ended that conversation permanently. 29. 30. 2 men attempting to set up a mortar, both dropped before the weapon was positioned. 31. 32. Her final magazine was nearly empty. 3 rounds left. She made them count. A fighter raising an RPG toward the platoon's position, the weapon that could kill multiple operators with 1 shot. Ava's bullet hit him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Her follow-up shot ended him. The last fighter standing tried to run. Ava tracked him through her scope, led him by 3 body lengths, accounting for the swirling wind, and squeezed the trigger one final time. 33. The valley fell silent except for the wind and the gentle whisper of falling snow. Clear, Ava transmitted, her voice hoarse, all threats neutralized. Ava descended the mountain in stages, her body running on fumes and willpower. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the battle was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion that made every step a negotiation with gravity. Her shoulder had started bleeding again. Her fingers were numb despite the gloves. Her legs trembled with each downward step, but she kept moving, using her rifle as a walking stick when the terrain allowed. The platoon met her halfway up the slope. Brooks was in the lead, and he stopped dead when he saw her, staring as if she were a ghost materialized from the snow. Ava. He seemed unable to find additional words. She swayed slightly, caught herself against a rock, looked at him with eyes that had seen too much in too short a time. 33 confirmed kills. Lieutenant, you're welcome. Brooks did something she'd never seen him do in 6 months of deployment. He removed his helmet, went down on one knee in the blood-stained snow, and bowed his head. I was wrong, he said, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. About everything, about you, about what it means to be a SEAL. You're the finest operator I've ever served with, and I'm sorry isn't enough. It'll never be enough, but it's all I have. One by one, the others followed. Ortega, his grizzled face showing something that might have been tears. Chen, Patterson, Rodriguez, all of them, kneeling in the snow before her. Ava felt her throat tighten. Part of her wanted to hold onto the anger, to make them suffer for abandoning her. But looking at these men, flawed, frightened, but ultimately her brothers, she couldn't. Get up, she said quietly. Mission's not over. We still have to get off this mountain. Ortega stood, moved to her side, and examined her shoulder with a medic's practiced eye. You're bleeding bad, frostbite. This should have been treated an hour ago. Was busy, Ava said. He barked a short laugh. Yeah, we noticed. He began field dressing the wound properly, his hands gentle despite the rough conditions. They fashioned a stretcher from equipment, 2 rifles and a tarp. Ava tried to protest, insisting she could walk, but her legs chose that moment to buckle. Rodriguez and Chen caught her before she fell. You've done enough, Rodriguez said softly. Let us carry you the rest of the way. Brooks personally took one end of the stretcher. They began the careful descent toward the extraction point, moving slowly through the snow. As they walked, Brooks spoke, his voice for her alone. What you did up there, saving us after we left you behind. Why? Ava thought of Lily, of Sarah, of every soldier who'd worn the uniform and understood that some bonds transcended personal grievance. Because the mission is taking care of your teammates, she said. Not keeping score, not holding grudges, just bringing everyone home. Brooks nodded slowly, and something in his expression shifted understanding. Maybe. Respect, certainly. The kind earned in blood and proved in action. The extraction helicopter met them at a cleared LZ 2 hours later. As they loaded aboard, Ava caught sight of the sunrise, breaking over the Afghan mountains, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. Christmas morning. She'd survived. 3 weeks later, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The ceremony was small, restricted to the unit and senior command staff. Ava stood at attention in her dress uniform, the fabric crisp and perfect despite the bandages still wrapped around her shoulder beneath it. The wound was healing well, the doctor said. No permanent damage. She'd be cleared for full duty in another month. The scars, though, those would never fully fade, and she was fine with that. Captain Robert Hendricks, their commanding officer, stood at the podium reading from the official citation. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of her own life above and beyond the call of duty, Petty Officer First Class Ava Marie Hale is hereby awarded the Silver Star, the United States military's 3rd highest decoration for valor in combat. The medal felt heavy as he pinned it to her chest. Not from its physical weight, the ribbon and star weighed almost nothing, but from what it represented. Validation, recognition, respect earned in the only currency that truly mattered in the teams. Courage under fire and brothers brought home alive. The applause was genuine, led by the men of her platoon. Brooks stood in the front row, his expression mixing pride with something that might have been shame. Good, he should carry that. They all should. But after the ceremony, when Brooks approached her during the reception, she saw that the shame had been tempered with something else, genuine growth. I've submitted a request to command, he said without preamble. I want you as my permanent second in command, senior enlisted advisor. The position comes with a promotion track to Chief Petty Officer. Ava studied him, searching for any hint of political maneuvering or empty gesture. She found none. Why? Because you're the best operator in this unit, Brooks said simply. Because you understand what leadership really means, not authority over others, but responsibility for them. Because I want to learn from you. He paused. If you'll have me as your CO, I'll think about it, Ava said. Then, more gently, thank you. That evening, she sat on the porch of her small house off base, watching snow fall over North Carolina pine trees. It was gentler than Afghan snow, quieter, peaceful. Lily was inside, finally decorating the Christmas tree they'd put up that morning 3 weeks late, but better late than never. The 8-year-old had understood, in the way military children learn too young, that sometimes mom's schedule didn't align with holidays. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ortega. Team's getting together at Murphy's. You coming? First 100 rounds are on us. Literally, we calculated what we owe you. Ava smiled, but didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked up at the stars appearing between snowflakes and thought about that mountain, about the choice she'd made, about 33 lives taken to save 12. The math was simple. The morality was complex. But she'd made peace with both. Mom? Lily appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream and marshmallows. You okay out here? It's cold. Ava accepted a mug, pulled her daughter close with her good arm. I'm perfect, baby, just thinking. About the war? About coming home. Lily snuggled against her, careful of the injured shoulder. I'm glad you did. I missed you so much it hurt. I missed you too. Ava kissed the top of her daughter's head. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Inside, the Christmas tree lights glowed warm against the darkness. Ava took a sip of chocolate, felt the silver star pin against her chest, and allowed herself finally to simply be present. No missions, no mountains, no enemies, just home. Ava Frostbite Hale had proven everything she needed to prove. To her doubters, to her team, to herself. She was a SEAL, a warrior, a mother, a survivor. And on one frozen Christmas Eve, when abandoned and alone against impossible odds, she'd shown the world exactly what those titles meant when combined in one person who refused to quit. 33 enemies had learned that lesson in the harshest way possible. 12 teammates lived because she'd made the hard choice. And one little girl still had her hero mom. The snow fell softly. Christmas lights twinkled in windows up and down the street. And Ava Hale, for the first time in months, smiled without shadows behind it. She'd come home. She'd kept her promise to Sarah, to Lily, to herself. And when her phone buzzed again, another text from Ortega, this one just saying, "We're waiting for you, Frostbite. Family waits." She texted back, "On my way." Because that's what she'd learned on that mountain. In that impossible fight against impossible odds. Family doesn't abandon family. And the teams were family. Even when they failed, even when they fell short, the bond remained. Tested, strained, but unbroken. Ava stood, helped Lily back inside, and grabbed her jacket. She had brothers waiting, and she'd never leave them behind again.